Good evening, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. I'm really excited tonight to have a reunion of sorts with two of our favorite folks. A long time ago, it feels like forever ago, but within the last 10 years, we had an amazing writing group at Charis called Making Space with these two wonderful folks, Dr. B. Nilaja Green and Alexandria Barabin Harris. And it was a group for clinicians and healers. And, honestly, I've thought a lot about this group in the pandemic because I see so much about the need for healers to have a place to heal and reflect, and the respect that healers often are not given, or they're just not given the space to care for themselves. And so that group was such a magic group, because it really did give people a chance to think about what energy am I bringing forward into the world. And so Dr. Nilaja Green has gone on to do some new work in the world, and so has Alexandria. And so we're here tonight to talk about that. The theme of this event is self-care for therapists and better therapy for all. And part of why we wanted to do this is because now Nilaja has two journals that we're going to be talking about. So first, I'm going to introduce Alexandria. Alexandria is a leadership development strategist, cultural worker, and facilitator for organizations dedicated to creating change. Through Yes, She, SHE, leads, Alexandria also provides workshops and coaching for career professionals as well as entrepreneurs to lead a life they actually love. So we're really excited to have you here. And
thanks for having me.
The person of the hour and the evening is Dr. B. Nilaja Green. Dr. Green is a trauma-informed therapist whose work includes trauma survivors, PTSD, depression, anxiety, serious mental illness, substance use, and general social stressors. Her clients include therapists, people of all genders, LGBTQ people, veterans, African Americans, and people of diverse races and ethnicities. She is now doing this work with the Introspective Journal series. Charis is very proud to carry these journals. They're beautiful. I got to look at them in person today at the bookstore. So I'm delighted to have y'all here to have this conversation and have a little bit of a Making Space reunion. So welcome to you both. I'm going to get out of the way, and I'm going to encourage folks who are watching with us at home, if you have questions, you can ask them at any time in the ask a question box or shout out in the chat where you're watching from. But otherwise, let's just get right into it. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is amazing, y'all. Shout out to everyone who is live with us for this important conversation with Dr. Nilaja. And shout out to those who are catching this on the replay and are, just getting a chance to tune in as well. Nilaja, Dr. Nilaja, should I call you Dr. Nilaja for the evening?
No, please call me Nilaja, Alexandria.
So I really want to start this conversation actually where ER left off, and really kind of honor the space that has brought this together. What is the first time that you remember going to Charis bookstore? Like, how did you find Charis? And what was that experience, if you can recall?
Oh my gosh, I did not expect this question.
I'm a bit like that.
So I remember when I first got to Atlanta in graduate school, Little 5 Points was one of the places you go as a new transplant. And I would pass by this lavender house. It said Charis Books. And I was like, I don't know what Charis means, but I like bookstores. And I wonder what this is. So I don't remember the very first time walking in, but I do remember walking in and there was something about it. I don't know if it was like the creak of the wooden floor or if it was like the smell of the books. I don't know if it was the person behind the counter who was probably smiling or chatting to someone in a very familiar way. But there was something about Charis that felt like a piece of home.
Yeah.
Right. It's like there's this space, this warmth, and this this air. There's like a freedom within that space. And I just, from that moment, I decided that was one of my favorite places in the city. Honestly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No,
Do you
and I
remember your time?
oh my goodness, I do. I was on vacation in Atlanta. I have family that lives in nearby, and visiting some friends, and came down around the time of a conference. You know some of my conferences, all
Mm-hmm.
the cultural conferences. And a day before I was getting ready to leave, some friends were like, "Yeah, you should go by a couple of the bookstores that are in town. You know, a couple of the Black bookstores, a couple of the like women's bookstores, feminist bookstores, because they're really great." And I'm like, "Wait, there are bookstores here that are completely dedicated to these communities? Show me the way, right?" So I walk into Karis, and just like you said, it signals a piece of home. It immediately did. It was just like the diverse representation, you know, like you said, the people smiling and greeting you as you come in. Look, the sexology section that's like, we're going to talk about sex positivity. I was like, wait, we're just
Yep.
on the shelf. We're just
Just
out
right
here.
there, just
We're just
so
right.
everybody can see it. It's not like hidden behind somewhere.
Absolutely. Like the Black studies section, or the cultural studies, that was more than Maya Angelou, which, you know, love Maya Angelou and Toni Morrison, but there were more, you know, voices than that were represented. Just all the different things. I said, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And I've never been to another place like it. And it definitely felt like a piece of home. And so for that reason, it was always a place that I gravitated to. So we just want to just send our gratitude to Karis Circle, and the entire community, because it really, truly impacted a lot of what you've created, honestly. You know, talk us through a little bit about how share your side of the story, how we came to doing our circle there, doing the writing for the healers and helping professionals. What was your journey to saying this needs to happen? Because this started with you,
Right.
okay? This
Right.
started with you. This needs to happen. And we were kind of going through where, and we landed on Karis. What was that process like for you?
So I completed my, so I'm a psychologist, and as part of our work, we completed internship and a postdoc. And my internship year and my postdoc year were at the same place, at Connecticut Mental Health Center, and also the Department of Psychiatry at Yale. And while I was there, I came into contact with a senior psychiatrist who had started a writing group called Writing About Patients as People. And I had gone to a grand rounds and I saw him present, and I knew I wanted to be a part of that. And so I sought him out, and he ignored me. And so then I sent another email, and he ignored me again. And so I think it took 3 or 4 times for him to even respond. And by the time he responded, he, wanted to know if I was serious, because the writing group met once a month in his house. And his house was full of old books. I don't even know if he owned a television. If so, maybe it was upstairs in the back room somewhere. But we crowded around his old wooden dining room table. And we were from all kind of aspects of the profession. So some of us were in our internship years. Some of us had been working in the field of psychology for years. There was one person who was a psychiatric nurse. And so we all sat around and we read what we had written the month before. And although the group was titled Writing About Patients as People, it turned out we were writing about ourselves as people. And as we were uncovering these stories about our patients, as we were uncovering our challenges and our places of being triggered and our places of hope, we really were learning so much about who we are and how we show up in the world, how we show up with each other, and how we show up in the work. And so at the end of those 2 years, I knew I wanted to have a space like that. And I knew I was coming back to Atlanta, and I didn't know of anything like that. And I may have reached out to you on Facebook, um, but I just had in my mind, I was like, there's somebody who I want to do this group. And I think I put out a call and was like, will somebody do this group with me? And you agreed. And it really was the beginning of something I think that was quite magical and also quite amazing. You know, we had this group once a month on Mondays at Charis. We had it rain, we had it snow, we had it when the air conditioning went out and it was 90 degrees outside. I think we canceled twice in 2 years, maybe.
Yeah, one was a power outage, so it was just like
so we literally could not sit in the space. But it was a space that once I got there, no matter what was happening during the day, I just felt enveloped, right? And as you know, everybody wasn't the same who came. Like, we didn't always have the same folks show up, but it didn't matter. Whoever was there was who needed to be there. Yeah. I felt that way every single time.
That's so true. And it's so powerful though. And you know, in full transparency, there were a number of years that you actually continued the group after I had a child and wasn't able to be as available. And so your heart for that community has always been clear. But whenever I was there, especially towards the end, it was just like, this is still palpable. It's the space, it's Charis, it's the space that you are able to hold for people. It's the honesty, it's the, you know, welcome, come one, come all, sit down, let your burdens, you know, let your burdens down and share whatever comes up. And so I'm really excited that you were able to, you know, take these ideas that actually were specific for therapists and then learn to translate them to help anyone who wanted to be able to do reflective work in a safe space, and bring out some of those tools that you know got from the professional side, but bring it into life in general. But let's talk a little bit more about that professional side. So one of the things that is true is that there's now an increase in Black folks, in marginalized folks, and, you know, people of color, LGBTQ folks who are saying, you know, I want careers as a therapist because I want to learn to serve these communities on a different level, on a deeper impact level. I want to increase representation. I want the services that I didn't have, right? Like, these are all the reasons that that those particular fields are being impacted at higher numbers of enrollment. But you listen, sis, you was ahead of the game. You was ahead of the game, ahead of the curve by about a decade. So what?
So old.
Well, I mean,
experience.
To, you know, that's what I was getting ready to say. I mean, listen, age has some benefits. How about that? Yeah. But in addition to that, it seems like you were ahead of the curve of that conversation, because before meeting you, I had not at all met any Black woman identified young therapists. Like, I was like, wait, how did you come to this journey? I remember asking you that question, like, how did you arrive here? Right. Like, you're not just like, and shout out to the spectrum of therapists that are there. There are different kinds, different levels, registered. You can be, you know, counselor. You can also, it ranges, right? Clinician and researcher. You are a psychologist with like a doctor. And I have so much admiration for the journey that you went through. And I'm wondering, did you have examples of that as to what led you to say this was a viable career for me? Like, what brought you to that space to do something that maybe have broken barriers for other people?
So I really appreciate this question because I'm actually working on something to create community with some other therapists who, like me, as I say, like, I'm not supposed to be here, right? Like, I actually had no models, no example. I can't think of anyone in the public eye or in my private life, or really even anyone that like my family knew who was a psychologist, who was a Black woman therapist, and certainly who wasn't a Black woman psychologist. Like that wasn't even it wasn't even a thing. And so I've felt for a long time, and sometimes still feel, that I am like building my bridge as I walk, right? I'm trying to kind of figure out what this thing looks like. How can I show up authentically in the work? How can I be relevant and useful to the people I want to be relevant and useful to? Because as much as I appreciate my education, and as much as I appreciate the schools that I've gone to and the opportunities that I've had, I'm also very clear that Western psychology has been crafted through a particular cultural lens and with a particular framework, some of which is not very helpful actually for marginalized communities. And part of my job, as I see it, is to take what is useful and helpful and also be as relevant as I can to the people that I'm working with. And sometimes that means throwing out some of those tools and pulling in some other pieces that may be considered alternative, right? Or have been marginalized from the literature or marginalized from our work.
Yeah.
So I think one thing was kind of becoming a Black woman psychologist. The other thing was becoming a Black woman psychologist who is trying to be culturally responsive and relevant. And yeah.
No, you're about to
My
hit on
soapbox.
something. Go ahead. Get back on the soapbox. The people want to know.
And I think that's a continuous journey.
Yeah.
I know for me, I had to go through, and I continue to go through my own journey of unearthing some of the unhelpful narratives that I have learned, right, about who I am and who I'm supposed to be.
Yes.
And of course, if we throw a queer identity on top of that, then we're all the way outside of the box. So I think the unearthing piece is the continuous piece, right? Like when I say these things, when I write these papers, when I engage with my colleagues, like what framework am I coming from? Am I being authentic? Am I perpetuating and recreating something that I say that I don't believe in, right? But it's my default setting because I grew up in the same society that the rest of us did. So I think it is a continual process of introspection, honestly, and a continual process of self-exploration and challenge, right? Like we're not just exploring and reflecting for the sake of exploration and navel gazing, but it really is about I am challenging some of this way of conditioning because I actually want to show up in a particular way in the world.
She said, "Not the navel gazing. We're not just staring at our own selves, saying, look at me, right?
Look how smart I am."
So it has a deeper purpose. It has more meaning in that regard. And I love what you did. I love what you did there. I don't know if you knew how clever you were being, but you were saying it really is introspective. I said, is that how we get the title of our introspective journal that we'll talk about a little bit later? Because you have created tools for that. And I think that's important for those listening to understand. And I think even for you to be able to acknowledge for your own self, right? Like as you're still unpacking how you show up and how you serve, I think it's important for you to be able to acknowledge that you are finding gaps in the existing work, and then are saying, I am equipped, right? I am knowledgeable enough. I am educated enough. I'm experienced enough to then begin to create solutions for the gaps that it is that I'm seeing, right? And so what are the things that you, in your profession, that you hope will change as a result of the kinds of work that you're doing, as the result of the kinds of work that others who, are wanting to increase representation in different areas, are wanting to serve different populations? What do you hope that the increase in that participation will change about the practice of therapy?
So I want to answer this question with a place of gentleness and loving kindness first.
Oh, okay. We're going to do that first. Okay. Go there first.
We're going to do that first.
And then we'll do the other thing. Okay.
I know that most of us, nearly all of us, are doing the very best that we can, that we are showing up with all that we have. And that we have intentions that are coming from a well-meaning place, and we are not wanting to cause harm.
Mm-hmm.
And I thank all of the practitioners who are out there doing the work, right? We are on the front lines. And also, one of the things that has happened in the history of kind of our work within the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years, is there's been a movement away from the person of the therapist as part of the essential piece of the work. And there has been more of a shift towards interventions that are quick, that have been shown to be effective, that are easily reimbursable by insurance companies and managed care. And part of what that has done is it has, I think, made it so that therapy can look a bit more like something that a technician is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And when we focus on the technique and we're not paying as much attention to the person who is employing the technique,
come on now,
then I think that there's something missing. Because as good as I can be at helping you challenge your thoughts, at labeling unhelpful thought patterns, at going over patterns of behavior that are not helpful for you, if you don't trust me, if I spend too much time in session disclosing things about me that are not actually relevant to you, if I'm using the hour for my own therapy, if I am kind of littering my bias all over you and my judgment, right? If I am not taking care of,
you're preaching, go ahead.
If I am not taking care of myself well enough, and I'm showing up in a way that is distracted, I'm showing up in a way that is short-tempered, or on the really kind of extreme end, I am violating boundaries within our therapy relationship, it doesn't really matter what my intentions are. I'm doing harm. I'm doing harm.
So that's really powerful, though, because it begs a couple of questions, but one that comes to mind, and I'd love your thoughts here, because I think as a person who you're practicing, but then you're also examining, right? You're also like, what's going to work for the greatest good? What's going to work to help people who don't know what this therapeutic situation is supposed to be like, but they know they need help. They need somebody to be there for them. They need an advocate. They need a listener. They need someone to help them unpack and heal and process. And they're coming to this person who, they have credentials. They got the A, B, C, D, E, F, PhD behind their name. Okay. And they're saying, all right, well, this is supposed to be helpful to me. And they're getting lost. Do you think that it is a lack of training, or is it a lack of personal care, where a lack of doing, anti-racist and anti-bias, perspectives? What do you think is the primary source as to why these harms are happening in 2021, 2022, like to this day, and they're not always being reconciled. They're not always being rectified.
So yes, and yes, and yes.
Okay. All right. Yes.
Like in my program, which I actually think was a really comprehensive program in many ways, there was not really there certainly wasn't a requirement. And the recommendation for personal therapy or personal work really varied depending on who you spoke to. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a miss. Yes, we had a diversity class, but having a diversity class versus really having an understanding of what it looks like to be a culturally responsive therapist, or a therapist who navigates in cultural humility, or a therapist who believes in kind of anti-colonial, equitable, liberation psychology oriented approaches, right? Like that's a completely different animal. So yes and yes and yes. And also, I think many folks who go into the field go because we want to help other people, right? We've been told that we're good listeners. We, for a long time, may have been a parentified child, right?
Ooh,
Where even our parents came to us for help.
I was going to say, can you just elaborate on that again? Parentification. Listen, y'all in the chat, and those who are listening, these are new words that she done schooled me on that have helped. When you hear a word in on the news, or you hear a word on Oprah, she says something profound, or you're reading a book at Charis and you're like, oh, what does this mean? You Google that and you were like, yo, my mind is blown. Like, that's how I felt about intersectionality years ago. I was like, what is this? This is amazing. My whole dynamic, my paradigm has shifted because I understand life. Parentification is one of those words for me. Can you just quickly explain what that is so people can know that context?
It's essentially when the child becomes the caretaker of the parent or whoever the caregivers are. And so they're the ones who are holding the emotional responsibility. Sometimes they are actually ones who are holding physical responsibility for running a household, for taking care of their siblings, for making sure that everyone is okay. And part of what can happen with the parentified child is their needs are submerged for the sake of the family, right? For the sake of their caregivers, for the sake of their siblings, for the sake of maintaining the family unit. So we have all these reasons, right, that we become therapists. And sometimes what's lost is that we become better therapists when we become better humans. Right?
Yes.
And it takes work to be a better human.
Yes.
And it takes continual work to be a better human. And so even if you leave your program and you are excited about helping others, which, by the way, this may be an unpopular opinion. Hopefully I won't get slack for it, but we'll see. I actually don't think that the desire to help people is enough.
Oh, say more, friend.
I think it's important for us to think about why we want to help people.
Yes.
Right? Are we so you know this, that my work in graduate school focused on the strong Black woman paradigm. And one of the aspects of the strong Black woman paradigm is caregiving to the detriment of your own needs. So sometimes we want to help other people because that is the only way that we know how to function.
Yes.
And the helping of other people serves as a way of avoiding ourselves.
You're hitting on it right there. And I think that not only applies to therapists, I think that can go for any helping profession, right? So then we're talking about folks who are in nursing, essential workers, social workers, case managers. I mean, people who genuinely care about human life and want to protect others. Is that a response to how other things have been in life? Is that feeling, narrow into your role? Well, this is the only place I have value. This is the only place that I get, validation. This is the only place where the work that I tend to do for free for these family, friends, neighbors, whomever is given a quantifiable way for me to live my life. And I get paid for it. Okay, well then, high five to me because I know my lane. It doesn't, I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, but I do hear what you're saying. Okay, if you are in that lane and this is what you're called to do, or this is what you feel compelled to do, don't just do the work or help others do the work. Make sure you do the work for you too. Is that what I'm hearing you say? Yeah.
And be clear, right, about what your intentions are. Because sometimes we're trying to work out our own stuff. Right? And we're not meaning to work out our own stuff. But, as ER mentioned, I do work with therapists. And in working with therapists, I get to take time with them as they walk through, right, their own journeys. And this isn't to say that in order to be useful, you have to have figured everything out, right? We're human beings. And so we are always on a journey.
Yeah, that's important.
It is important, though, that you know what's going on with you.
Self-awareness.
Right? Self-awareness.
Yes.
And more than that, right? Self-awareness and also like a commitment to doing something with that awareness, right? So I had a supervisor who, within her therapy sessions, if she asks you a question about you and you say, I don't know, she says, you're not allowed not to know about you. You cannot know why your spouse, right, did this thing. You cannot know why your mother didn't do that thing. But when it comes to you, your job is to know why.
She sounded like she was going to step on my toes if I was sitting in front of her, but it might have been.
Well, she stepped all over all 10 of mine and a few of my fingers.
Did she tap dance on them too? Did
Absolutely.
She kind of, okay. She had a two-step. Okay.
Absolutely.
So what is your recommendation for that helping profession, that therapist, that lover of people, that, server who's going, maybe I'm in this position now and I'm actually avoiding me to be able to serve others? What do I do from here? Like, where are you suggesting that they take next steps? Because it's not a hopeless situation, right?
Not at all.
That's not what and I want to make sure that people know that if that's the if that's the reality that they need to wake up to, that there are steps that they can now take. So what are some of them, maybe just one or two things that are like, okay, you had that realization, or you're on the verge of burnout. You're experiencing extreme compassion fatigue. You are exhausted. You're losing your, fire for doing things, especially in this pandemic, right?
Yeah.
In this way where it's just constantly nonstop news, nonstop, shutdowns, nonstop information about what's supposed to happen, nonstop sickness around us, if it's not in fact happening to us in our bodies, right? So many different things. What do you then say to that person who may have that epiphany, that they're in that space and they didn't realize it? What are some of the first things that they might need to do?
So the first thing that I would suggest for both therapists and people who are in therapy, and sometimes therapists are in therapy, so that's an artificial divide, right?
Right.
I hope that therapists are in therapy at some point in their journeys. The first thing that I would suggest is to approach yourself with compassion and to step back from judgment. I always tell my clients that judgment stops the conversation. So if you say, well, like I'm just a failure, it might seem like you're actually communicating something, but the word failure has a lot of different meanings. Yeah. And if you decide that you are a failure, then that can keep you from the wisdom that is connected to whatever experience you're talking about, even if that experience has been one that has been disappointing for you. So whenever you go into the journey of self-reflection and introspection, it's important to start from compassion, and it's important to start from a place of non-judgment. One of the exercises that I really like is the 5 whys exercise. And this is where you interrogate yourself by asking why 5 times. I want to be a therapist when I grow up. Why? Well, because I'm a good listener. Why? Well, everyone in my family always came to me. Why? Well, because I was always the strong one. Why? Well, because I couldn't be any other way. So now we have some information.
Wow.
So maybe part of the reason, right, that you want to be a therapist is to somehow answer this place where you have always been the strong one. You have never been the one who could let your needs be known. You have never been the one who could express vulnerability. You can never be the one who could show up fully as yourself. So that's in there. That's inside of this dream somewhere. That's inside of this goal somewhere. And it's important for you to know that.
That's powerful. I mean, it's like a very simple exercise, but it's not an easy exercise, exactly. Right? Simple, not easy. So that's really powerful. And I hope that that's a tool that our listeners today would be able to take with them and say, okay, put that in my mental pocket right there, and come back when I'm, feeling like I need to check in with myself, use the 5 why tool. Is that a tool that's that you include in your journal? Is that something that you practice with your therapist?
That is something I practice with my therapist and with my class. I teach a mindfulness class, but it is not
At Emory, right? Emory University.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I saw what you did there.
You see what I did there? Let me adjust your crown for you real quick. The mindfulness class you teach at Emory University.
Yes.
Okay. Just clarify.
Which has been a very interesting kind of journey in thinking, right, about the purpose of individual work and solo work. Because as a caveat, many of us in the West think about mindfulness as an opportunity to reduce stress, an opportunity to increase concentration so you can increase productivity, as a way to manage anxiety and depression symptoms or pain. And so we often think of mindfulness as a skill. And we're not always aware that mindfulness practice actually comes from a larger ethical framework for living. So you are doing this individual work of meditating and growing awareness and paying attention to the breath so that you can develop so much awareness within yourself that you recognize your connection to other human beings and other beings. And because of your connection to other beings, you approach everyone and everything with compassion and empathy. And so if we have a world that is built on folks who are compassionate and empathic with one another, we have a world where there's less harm. And that's a very different way, right, of thinking about mindfulness from stress reduction.
Yeah.
So,
although it could definitely benefit still with stress reduction.
Absolutely.
But I think again, you're going to not the what, but the why, right?
Exactly.
And the power of the why. So I want to shift gears to think a little bit more about how all of these things that we're learning about therapists and the ways in which the therapists who are willing to do the work, right? Who are willing to take time for their self-care, take time for their self-awareness, practice compassion, practice empathy, practice anti-bias and anti-racist ideologies that make more room and more space for people, are LGBTQ plus affirming, right? They're welcome to every person, every body, every human, right? In the ways that will benefit those who just want a good therapist, right? Who just want to have a healthy, positive experience. And so whether you're a therapist or not, there's still a rich benefit in understanding the perspective that maybe the therapist that you're going to encounter has. What would you say to those who are saying, I've had a rough experience with a therapist. I didn't feel supported. I actually may have felt discriminated against. Or like an example that you mentioned before, I felt that person burdened me with their burdens, right? As opposed to really providing the space for me to lay my burdens down as what I was expecting. And I asked this question because number one, because there are, like you mentioned, therapists who are willing to do the work, like yourself, and like the type of therapist that you train. But I also ask it because I was looking at some research and it was saying that many people do not find the right therapist until 2, maybe 3 experiences with different therapists until they find the right one who sees them as a whole human being and who is able to really approach them in a way where they feel supported and really helped. And I think for a lot of marginalized folks or coming from marginalized communities specifically, get discouraged, right, from pursuing that type of tool because of that positioning. So what would you offer as an encouragement to those who are, struggling with kind of getting more comfortable with their therapist or getting more comfortable with the idea of going to therapy at all? And do you have some words of encouragement for them as they pursue that?
So, first, I would say to those who have had unfavorable, harmful, unethical experiences with therapists that I'm sorry that that has happened to you, and I believe you. As a naive therapist, it was hard for me to believe some of the stories that my clients were telling me. And unfortunately, I had many clients who were telling me many stories. And eventually, you get to the place where even though you want to give your colleagues the benefit of the doubt, you have to really reckon with the reality that so many people are experiencing. So I want to just kind of acknowledge that. And I want to say that you're actually one of the reasons that I created Introspective Journal, because I felt like there had to be a way, right? There had to be a way that therapists could do their own work. They could ask themselves the hard questions. They could admit to themselves things that they won't even admit to their own therapists or their own consultation groups or their own supervisors. There had to be a place where we could put our own experiences, where we could say, you know what, like I have this client who's really triggering for me every time I see them, right? Like something comes up and and I'm worried about how I'm responding to them because I'm triggered, because that happens, right? We're human beings, which also goes to, I don't think that every therapist is the right therapist for every person. um, we we have different strengths, and there are some of us who consider ourselves to be generalists, and we might say, yes, I treat everyone and everything. I don't want to go to a therapist who treats everyone and everything.
Right.
I want to go to a therapist who has specific experience with the specific concerns that I have, right? So it is up to you, right, to decide what is most important to you, but also to recognize that you are building a relationship with someone. And in the same way that most of us don't get into relationships with the very first people that we date, finding a therapist is kind of like that. So I tell my clients, our first couple of sessions, you're getting to know me and I'm getting to know you. And I'm going to check in to see how this relationship is going because I want to know. I always end my sessions by asking, do you have any questions, comments, or concerns? And then I say, what did I miss?
Mm,
What did I miss this session? Or
wow.
is there anything that I missed? Is there anything you wish I had talked about or spent more time with? Because I'm wanting to check the temperature.
That's so empowering. And speaking of questions, I do want to provide the opportunity for those who are listening live for you to drop questions in the chat. If you have questions, whether you are a therapist or you are considering therapy or you're in therapy and you're wanting to just ask Nilaja about some of her own experiences or anything that you have top of mind, or if you want to get some specific questions answered about self-care, then let's definitely do that too. But I want to go back to what you're saying though, because it's really an empowering statement to say in a dynamic where, let's say, as someone who is, go to a therapist, and even the perception of that is a power dynamic that they know they are the expert, they are in charge, if I were to say it that way. And there are times where it feels like, hi, I don't know the right thing. I do not
Mhm.
know. I'm not sure. Right. And so for you as the person who holds either power or perceived power to then say, now what did I miss? For me, I hear it opening the door for you to get feedback.
Yep.
I hear it opening the door for that person to feel empowered that their voice matters, not only to their own experience and that knowledge, but also like into the dynamic itself, that it's not just flatly, this hierarchy of some sort. Um, why did you start doing that? And what did you expect people to say? And have people taken advantage of that opportunity to speak their truth in that moment?
So, questions, comments, and concerns, I've been saying for years. I can't even remember. I got that from someplace that wasn't even around therapy.
Mhm.
Um, the what did I miss question came from, I was reading an article that was written several years ago in the Psychotherapy Networker, I think, about super shrinks. And super shrinks, right, are these practitioners who for some reason, seem to be more effective at retaining clients. Clients have a more positive experience with them. They feel confident in their work, and clients keep coming back. And so there was a story of a woman who was doing an intake, and she had a pretty good feeling at the end of the intake, but she wasn't quite sure if this person was going to come back. And so she asked him, right? Like, did I miss something here? What did I miss? And so I started to incorporate that question. And I then say to people, no, I'm serious, right? Like, really tell me, what did I miss? Did I miss something? In addition, though, I will offer interpretations during session, and I will say, so this is what I think. Does that sound right to you? What do you think about that? Let me know, right? If I'm not hearing this correctly, because it isn't just at the end of the session that I'm asking for feedback, but it actually is all along the experience. And this is really my attempt to put into practice something that we know from the psychological literature, that no matter what approach you use, evidence-based approach, much of what is effective in therapy is based on what's called non-specific factors. And the non-specific factors, that's the relationship. That's the trust, that's the bond, that's the appreciation between therapist and client. And so my way of bringing those non-specific factors to the fore, right, and allowing those non-specific factors to be a conversation is by asking those questions all throughout.
So then what I hear you saying is that you make it more of a conversation, collaboration between the expert knowledge that you have, but the authority that these people bring from their experiential knowledge, like they've been living it. They are in their own bodies. They are in their experience, and you need more input from them to guide them better. So then it's co-creating. See, that's some powerful stuff. That ain't what everybody out here doing. And I love that what you're creating are tools to help therapists be better for themselves. Yeah. And then consequently are also going to be better for the client. So that's extremely powerful. I see here we have a question. Ooh, awesome. We have a question.
Okay, question.
What's the number one thing? Thank you so much for dropping your question in the chat, friend. What's the number one thing you learned in the process of making the journals that you didn't already know from your practice? Ooh, so that's getting right to the journal question. You've created two. One journal that specifically is for therapists so that they can do their self-work and reflect and process, on their journey as they're practicing. And then you've also created a journal for those who are attending therapy, for them to have their own safe space to process as well. So what did you learn in that process? Let me repeat the question. What's the number one thing that you learned in the process of making the journals that you didn't already know from your practice?
I learned so many.
Oh, so many. Okay.
So many things.
Listen, break it down. Give them two jewels, two nuggets. Okay.
So from creating the therapist journal, it was a download that literally came to me in 3 days. And then I'd written all the questions down and I shopped them around actually with some of my therapist colleagues. Does this make sense? Do you think this is relevant? Do you think this matters? One of the things that I learned was that when we work with self-exploration and introspection, there are levels to this thing, as they say, right? So we start at a particular level of awareness, but then there's another level of awareness. And then there's another level of awareness. And the journal actually mimics that. So we start with the foundation. And this sounds a little bit like an infomercial, but we start with the foundation, right? We start with your values. What do you care about? Like, narrow that down. And how are you living the things that you say you care about? And if you're not, what are the barriers to that? Right? So it really helped me to think about, like, down to the foundation of me, right? Where does this place start? So that's that piece. For the client journal, one of the things that I really learned was thinking I really needed to hone down what I thought clients needed and what they needed to know before they came into therapy and what they needed to know while they were in therapy. So the whole first part of the journal is somewhat about if you're still shopping for therapists, here are some questions to ask and some things to think about. Right?
Amazing.
Here are some differences between different professions. Here are ways of thinking about goals. But then I have another section that's like, let's talk about just emotions and like what they are and why they're important and why you can't believe everything that you think and why can't you sleep. And let's talk about shame and guilt. Oh, and joy and meaning, right? Like all of these are, I think, the foundation to any therapeutic work that you're going to do. So I had to kind of get down to the basics, I think.
This is so powerful, y'all. This is some just I just if there are other questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. But I just have to acknowledge that you have this amazing comment. And it says, I just visited Atlanta last weekend. Okay. And my friend and I came across this amazing journal. I just started filling it out and I have my next session this coming Monday. I just wanted to say thank you, Nilaja, for creating this journal. Isn't that powerful? I mean, so
Thank you.
yes. Oh, so when you hear things like that, what does it mean to you to hear that people are benefiting and being impacted positively by something that you created? And I'm going to just say it, out of your activist spirit, out of your, desire to change the world, kind of heart that I know that you have. What does that, how does that resonate with you when you hear that?
All right. In therapist style and being vulnerable, I feel both anxious and excited, and really hopeful. I wrote a life vision for myself a couple of years ago. And I kind of updated it because I wrote a life intentions list. I have an intentions list about how I want to show up. And my hope is that I and my efforts, right, show up through the work that I'm creating. Not because I know everything and I figured it all out, but because as we did in Making Space, part of my work is to create spaces for people to connect to their own power and their own healing and their own resilience and their own meaningfulness and their own joy. And so if I can do that through creating a piece of writing that someone else can find that space in, then I'm doing my work. I'm doing my work.
Such powerful thoughts. I want to ask you one last thing, and I'm going to use your technique and you fill in what did I miss, if there's anything that you wanted to add there. What is the transformation that you hope these journals for therapists and also, of course, for those who are using therapy as a tool for help and healing? What is the transformation that you hope these journals will have on the therapeutic community?
I want therapists to increase their clarity about what they're doing and why they're doing it. I want therapists to increase their capacity to challenge themselves in the work. I want therapists to trust themselves enough to take risks in the room. Because so psychology is a science and therapy is an art, right?
Okay, yes.
And that's how I'm borrowing it.
Yes.
And I think some of the most impactful moments happen in the art. They happen in the spontaneity. They happen in the presence. And we can only really make space for that when we trust ourselves enough to be responsive. Above anything and everything, I think we need to be responsive and effective. And we do that through growing our own trust. I also hope that therapists really learn to take better care of ourselves. So many of us, we get into the frame of mind that we need to be available for everyone at all times. We cannot actually be available for everyone at all times. We just don't have that capacity. And so I really want therapists to give themselves permission and to understand that it's actually our ethical responsibility to take care of ourselves. We are the tool of our work. If we are not taking care of our tool, then our tools are not as effective.
They don't work. They don't do the right work. Yes. So where can people follow you to find more information? Obviously, there's a button here for those who are live where they can purchase the journals directly from Charis Books, which of course we want to support Charis as Charis is supporting you in this amazing opportunity. But where can people follow you further and find out more about other opportunities that you are creating and co-creating in the therapeutic community?
So I'm on Facebook, Dr. B. Nilaja, and also Instagram at Dr. B. Nilaja. I'm also creating a space for therapists to grow confidence and to become the therapist of their dreams called Therapist University, which is launching at the end of this month, really just kind of an appreciation, right, of Social Worker Month. And also they can reach me at www.atlantatraumatherapy.com. That is my practice website, and folks can kind of email me or give me a call. I am busy and also try to be responsive as quickly as I can.
Listen, you're practicing what you preach, setting boundaries,
Working on it.
part of self-care, right? Making sure that you're making space for new opportunities, but also preserving and protecting the ones that you've already said yes to. So that's awesome. And, I just want to, again, celebrate everything that you have accomplished. Not only do you have this incredible PhD in a field that is extremely rigorous and have been doing this work for a long time, but you also are trauma informed, certified. You also are culturally responsive. You've also done these trainings that are much more, at a higher level of inclusivity than most therapists train for in your general practice. You are just an amazing resource, an amazing creative and artist, an activist in the work that you're doing, and a smart businesswoman who's saying, I am going to be here to, collaborate with organizations like Charis that's already out here doing the work and connecting with the people. And I am going to represent Black women who are knowing that they need to create their own methods of freedom and their own methods of creativity so that their voices are heard and their representation matters. So thank you so much for this amazing conversation. Thank you for those who are listening live and also those who have joined on the replay. And I am handing it back over to ER for you to take us home.
Thank y'all so much. This was such a great reunion and wonderful conversation. I'm really grateful and really proud of you, Nilaja. This is exciting. I love the best part of my job is getting to see people through so many phases of their life's work. So congratulations. I want to encourage folks to click this teal button to buy either journal or both journals directly from Charis, and also be sure to visit the links that I put in the chat to learn more about Nilaja's work more generally. So thank you both so much. I wish you both so much good health and joy and peace and safety and all good things. And, once we can get out of this pandemic panorama, I hope we can do some more in-person stuff. So it's always a pleasure. And again, congratulations. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you to you, both amazing, amazing human beings. You inspire me all the time, honestly, like all the time. I'm so deeply grateful to have crossed paths with both of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.